Hello and welcome to this AV-LAN review of the Denon AVR-X2000 home cinema receiver. We're going to talk to you a bit about the features of this AV receiver, we're going to show you its setup menus and networking, and we're also going to tell you what we think it sounds like.
So this is this year's mid-priced AV receiver from Denon, and it replaces last year's AVR-2113. It keeps the same sort of look. It's a fairly clear front panel. It's a plastic front panel rather than aluminium, and it has a dial on the front for the volume and a dial on the left that does the input selection, and it's fairly clean sort of looking. Power-wise, they have changed the way they rate their receivers, and this one now, they say we always take the lower figure and we like to take ones that are RMS, so it's 95 watts with 2 channels driven at 8 ohms, and it's 125 if you say it's just 1 channel driven at 1 kilohertz at 6 ohms. But realistically, nobody's going to be using it like that. So it's slightly misleading, and that's kind of, they've done that to counteract other manufacturers. Onkyo always rate their receivers in that way. But we like to take the lower figure, so we would say it's more like 95 watts. And actually, if you were to drive all 7 channels, it's probably going to be even lower. Now, with those 7 channels, you can do a variety of different things. You can, of course, use it for 7.1, or you can have a Zone 2 powered, or you can biamp your front channels. If you're not using 5.1, more than 5.1 in the main room, you can do either of those 2 things. You can see here it has a HDMI front input as well as a USB input for playing back files from an iPod or from a USB stick or USB hard disk drive. It has 7 HDMI inputs in total, 6 on the rear panel and that one on the front. It has True HD decoding, Dolby Pro Logic 2Z, DTS HD master audio, and it also has Odyssey Multi-EQ XT room correction. The HDMI inputs, they're all the sort of latest spec of 1.4, so they'll do 3D pass-through. And it also has networking, which is becoming a more and more standard feature, so you can stream music across your network, as well as listen to internet radio. And this model also supports out-of-the-box Spotify Premium, but you do have to pay for that. It won't do it with a free account. They've changed the back panel slightly. The speaker connections on this model now are cleanly laid out in one long row, and they've also borrowed from Onkyo color coding. So if you color code all your wires, it makes it a bit easier to plug them all back in. Fairly minimal analog inputs now, and only 2 optical inputs on this sort of price. Again, that's becoming pretty standard at this price point. One output that's for HDMI that is ARC, audio return channel compliant. So if your television will do that, it will send the audio for your television back down the cable that goes out from the receiver. So quite useful, cuts down on cables. The back speaker connections, you can, as you can see here, use banana plugs, or you can bare wire. We recommend using banana plugs over bare wire because with bare wire they can oxidize up, they can become loose and touch each other if they're not if you don't solder them up. And it's generally just a bit more messy, although not so bad here with them all in a row. Now inside the AVR-X2000, this is the main board. This has all the decoding. It has the HDMI inputs and output. It's where the sort of brains, the main processing is done on the amplifier. Lots and lots of surface mount integrated circuits there. And it is fairly packed out. Here you can see the main sort of amplification modules attached to the heatsink, and that's the power supply, the big block you can see at the bottom. And each one of those, it's got 7 channels, and it has separate 2 output stages per channel as well to improve audio quality. It's pretty packed out. You're getting a lot for your money. A lot of components. You can see there's even things bolted there to the chassis to earth them. Now these are the setup menus. These overlay whatever video source you've got coming through. And some of them you can't get into unless you've got a source coming through. So slightly frustrating actually, but yeah, so play something through if you want to go and fiddle with some of them. So the audio or video settings don't always, they grayed out sometimes when you can't get to them. You can't get to them unless you have a source. You have things like you can have a sort of basic tone control, although this has got full equalization as well. We don't recommend this. You shouldn't have to use either tone controls or equalization. You should have some speakers that marry up well with it, but it's still useful to have. You might have a different brand or model of center speaker to the rest of your speakers that doesn't quite match up acoustically, especially if you're building a system up from scratch, in which case it might sound better having equalization on. Can change the scale that the volume counts up. We recommend having it on the -dB. 0 dB is full volume. Past that will cause damage potentially to your speakers and the receiver. So use with caution if you go past there. You really only need to go past 0 dB if you've got a very, very quiet signal that you want to boost. You can go in here, if you switch the multi-EQ XT on the graphic EQ, you can go in here and actually manually play with the configuration for each channel or each of the channels, so you can boost certain frequencies. Now the video menu, you've got a picture adjust feature. We recommend having this turned off. You should really leave all the video processing to your display device, your television or projector. There's an auto lip sync feature. Don't really know how well that works, but you've also got the manual one that we just showed you. You can switch on a HDMI control, and one of the things we like here as well is we can tell it to not do the power off control, because this can be quite annoying. It's mixed results with HDMI control whether it works. The idea is that you can turn on your amplifier from your television and vice versa. And you can do other commands as well, but it doesn't always work in practice and actually can cause some problems. So if you're having any kind of connectivity problems, it's the first thing that we always go to. If you're having problems with HDMI, turn it off. Turn off the HDMI control. You can adjust the resolution and also the aspect ratio as well. Those are the settings here for the on-screen display, whether you have the volume displayed at the bottom or not, what degree of information you have on there. You can set the TV format to being PAL or NTSC if you're, depending on what the display system is in where you live, which country you live. Here in the UK, it's PAL and most of Europe's PAL. Here's where you can change all the way the different inputs are assigned. So if you want to use the optical input, for instance, on one of these, you can also set it so that it gets its sound from optical rather than HDMI. It's useful on some devices where you don't always get the right sound formats coming down the HDMI. Skyboxes here in the UK used to do that. There are still some of the old ones out there, I think, do that, where you don't get Dolby Digital down the HDMI, just stereo. So you have to hook up optical as well. You can also assign a HDMI input to CD as well, because it's got so many HDMI inputs on. There are almost not enough inputs for you to assign them to. You can also rename the inputs, so to make it a little bit easier to identify what they are, you could maybe put in whether it's an Xbox or a PlayStation on the game input, or whether it's Sky for the satellite input. And here's where you can hide them, as I mentioned earlier. If you want to just have the inputs that you've got connected, hide all the ones you're not using, and that front dial will just jog through and go to the ones you've selected. You can adjust each of the inputs as well. If some of them, one's much louder than the other, you can balance them out so you don't have any sudden boosts of volume when you change input. You can force it here into DTS. Most AV receivers allow you to do this. We don't recommend it. There's no real need. It could lead to you not getting any sound through when it's not DTS. Here you can go back in and do the Odyssey again and tinker with the Odyssey settings. It will come up automatically when you plug the setup microphone into the front as well. Here's where you assign whether you're going to use those extra amps for biamping, Zone 2 or 7.1. You can also run 2 sets of speakers A and B on separate amps at the front. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but it can be done. If you've got bi-wireable speakers at the front, if they're floor-standing speakers or even a larger bookshelf, and you're not using those amps for anything, we do recommend biamping. It does improve the sound quality because you've then got 4 amps on your front speakers. Here in the speaker settings, unless you're using an actual sub-sat system, I would always set these to large. I know it gives a picture of them being floor standards for large, but if you've just got conventional bookshelf speakers that can go down to a fairly low frequency, then I would set that to large. It also depends on what your subwoofer is capable of doing, so have a look at the specs for the different speakers and judge that for yourself, what you set it to. But you can go in and you can adjust the subwoofer frequency as well. Here you can set the individual levels if you're manually setting it up. You want to sit in the listening position and you want to get them all so they're equal sounding. You can do that with the sound pressure meter, but you can do it by ear as well. It's really not that difficult. Here's where you set the frequencies of each of the speakers as well. If you're not using that small large configuration, you can go in and tweak it and tell it when it's getting information from that particular channel to send it to the subwoofer. And here's where you set the cutoff frequency for your sub as well. If you're going to use this and you have an LFE input or a bypass to bypass the same setting on your subwoofer, then it's best doing it this way round and making sure you're not filtering it twice and just turning off all the filtering or turning the filter all the way up. That's a very important setting there. If you're using the control app, have that switched on. Otherwise, when you turn the receiver off, it will turn off all its networking to save power. The other problem as well with that is when you switch the amplifier on from standby, it takes up to about 30 seconds really to connect to the network. So a good idea, even if you're not using the app, if you're just using the networking, to have that switched on. It doesn't use that much more power in standby, so it still turns off all the amplifying circuits. Here's the Zone 2 setup. You can adjust the levels. You can fix the volume limit so it can't be turned up too loud. Very useful if you've only got small speakers or in-ceiling speakers. You can rename the zone as well if you want to make it kitchen or bedroom, or if you've got like an outside patio or something with some all-weather speakers. You can rename it there to make it a little bit easier for people to understand what it is. You can adjust the front display, whether it's you can turn it off or dim it if it's too bright. It shows you also what information about what's coming in, video and audio, and what's going out as well. What's the television you've got connected, what it's capable of doing. Here it shows you which inputs on Zone 2 in the main zone. They can be completely independent, they don't have to be the same. Whether to give you alerts for the firmware, whether there's a firmware update. There's also a setting here which worryingly actually is set to on, that sends Denon, although it says anonymously, information about your usage. I'd turn this off. I don't like the idea of that. The higher range X4000 has that turned off by default, and you have to turn it on. You have to opt in. But this, for some reason, is turned on by default. So you can also lock the setup so people can't play with these settings once you've got it just how you like it. You don't want someone coming along and fiddling with it. Now this is its networking menu. This is for internet radio. It's fairly quick. You can see here it brings up some information from the radio station. It can be a picture of the DJ, it can be some album art, or just the station's logo, as you can see there. You can look by country as well and look up lists. On the Spotify side, you can search for music. You have to have a Spotify premium account. I know I've already said it, but people still ask. You have to have a Spotify premium account, which there is a charge. It's not available everywhere in the world. It's available here in the UK. It's available in the USA. It's pretty quick to find things. We do like how nippy it is. Again, brings up album art too, so quite good. It also does this on the app as well. You can use this with Denon's app. The great thing about using the app is you can turn the television off, so you don't have to have your television on if you're just listening to music. It is all still compressed though, Spotify. It's not high quality, so it's good for background music. It's good for finding out about new music, as you can see there. It's having things put onto it constantly. All this information as well, you can browse it from using the remote control and the front display. So everything's repeated. Here it is playing a FLAC file. This is a 192 24-bit. Last year's model didn't do this. It will also play WAV files as well if your NAS drive can support it, or your DLNA server will support this. You can just play raw files, unencrypted and uncompressed. And it also has the ability to bring up images as well. So here it is doing flicker. The quality is not brilliant on it, and it does seem to be the wrong dimensions as well from what we can see. So not that useful, but it does it. This is what you get inside the box. These are the accessories. So a new feature for this year is this sheet of stickers. Again, borrowing from Onkyo. They've done this for a number of years. You can put on these color-coded stickers that tie up with the back panel and make it a lot easier to identify the speaker connections if you want to move them. Coupling that with having banana plugs means if you want to move it to clean underneath it, or you move your room around, it makes it a lot easier to plug it all back in again. You could find that it's going from maybe taking an hour to wire it all back up again. It only take you a few minutes potentially, because you don't have to identify where all the cables are if you've got all the stickers on. So you get an FM only aerial, because it only has an FM tuner, a quick getting started manual. The rest of the instruction manual is on a CD-ROM as a PDF, or you can download it from Denon's website. This is the remote control. We quite like the remote control. It's quite cleanly laid out, has nice big buttons for the volume. And it seems fairly simple to use. We like that in the remote control. It also will glow in the dark. For how long, I don't know, but you can see that's quite a useful feature as well. It needs to be in the light to begin with. They're luminous buttons, not backlit, unfortunately, just luminous. Now this is Denon's control application. It seems very similar to last year's. I didn't really updated it, and it is primarily designed, although they haven't officially said this, it seems primarily designed for a mobile phone, because it's just everything's too big on it. You can see here we're using it with a tablet, and the buttons look all grainy, and there could be a lot more controls on here than there actually are, and you have to go to various different menus if you want to change things like the sound mode. It has to come up and pop up. It can be quite laborious to use and long-winded. Still, it's useful because you can use it to control the second zone if you've got a second zone. You can use it to control it a bit better than the remote control if you're using the television is turned off and you're just listening to music. And it has some extra things as well to control the networking. It displays them a bit better than how it's displayed on the television, but still not to its full potential. You can edit the different inputs that it has on the front there. We'd prefer if you could just see them all, but you have to go into another menu to do that. It's pretty quick, but it is designed for a phone, and it's not the most intuitive thing to use. The volume's on a slider, which we don't like because you can very quickly go too loud and cause damage to your speakers. It does have two buttons either side, but they're too small. So, they could do with refining it. The album art comes back fairly well for when you're using it for Spotify or DLNA. It's fairly good, but it could be better laid out. You can see here it's very wasteful of screen area here as well. For the tuner, there could be other things here to control, but this whole screen's mostly blank. Now, there is an alternative. This is a third-party app called My AV, and we have tested it and it works with the X2000. This is a totally different concept in that all the controls you want are in one place pretty much. So your volume, your input switching, your mode buttons, they're all there no matter what it is you're actually controlling. And it's designed for a tablet, not for a phone. It will work with a phone, but it is designed for a tablet. And the other big advantage of this is it will control other components. So here it is controlling the Denon, but it can also control a Blu-ray player. This isn't even a Denon Blu-ray player. This is a Pioneer Blu-ray player and a Panasonic one. It does a variety of different manufacturers, different devices, and it brings a lot more feedback. It tells you whether those devices are turned on or not. You can see on the actual Blu-ray input down the bottom there's a little light. That means it's connected successfully to a Blu-ray player and that the Blu-ray player is turned on. It brings back things like the track times and power. It will also control television. So we've seen it working with a Panasonic television. We've seen it working with a Humax set-top box, with a Virgin Media TiVo box as well. And you can do things like move the channels around, get rid of channels you don't want anymore, and still control the actual receiver. So even though we're here on the thing that controls, this is a Humax set-top box, you can still control the volume on the right there. It isn't for the Humax, it's for the Denon. You can change inputs, you can change sound mode. So if you want it in stereo, you want it in surround, you can do all those things. You want to hit mute, it's there all the time. So if the phone rings, you can just turn it off. You don't have to go through to another menu, you don't have to go to a different app. It's all in one place. The pros and cons for the AVR-X2000. Pros. Sound quality. It is a very clean, crisp and punchy sound. Some people may find it a little bit bright, and that's kind of the Denon sound. It's not to say that it's lacking in bass, it's just sometimes on the trebles it can be a little bit grating, but generally the main part of that is that it's clear and clean. And we like that. It goes well if you've got soft dome tweeter speakers that maybe sound a little bit dull. It can sort of breathe some life into those. It's good that it's now got the 192 kHz support, and it has got a lot of features for the price, the networking, the Spotify. We like all its sort of general feature pack. The Odyssey setup as well. Not all AV receivers have got that at this price point. So all round, feature-wise, we can't complain. Sound-wise, it partners well with, like I say, soft dome tweeted speakers rather than metal dome. It's not to say it's awful with metal dome, but it can be a bit too much, especially if they're bright to begin with. So maybe look at something else if you've got metal dome tweeter speakers. Cons. The app is really, really poor. We really don't like that. We've seen that it can be done better. So, they really need to produce an app. We do it. We use Android devices, but the app for iOS it looks exactly the same, and it's just as unintuitive. The plastic fascia. I don't know what it is about it. Other manufacturers have plastic fascias at this price point. I think it's because it's smooth, and other fascias are meant to, they look like they're trying to look like brushed aluminium, but it really does draw attention to the fact that it's plastic being smooth. And I think if you're going to have a plastic fascia, you need to do something clever with it to try and detract from it looking like that. So yeah, we don't like the plastic fascia. Not necessarily per se because it's plastic, but because it looks so obviously plastic. If that makes sense, it looks cheap. And although this is a mid-priced receiver, it's not the more expensive models. We feel it should look a bit better. So yeah, they're the two main things that we'd say on the sort of downside for this price. But all round, it's a good performer. It's got all the things you'd expect it to have for the price, and sound-wise, it's good. It comes across in an impressive way for music, and for movies, it's detailed, quick, and punchy.
That's the end of our review of the AVR-X2000. If you'd like to purchase this unit or you'd like to see more video reviews, please visit our website avlan.co.uk. Thank you.